All right, so hello everyone. We're super excited for today. So for everyone that is joining right now, we will be starting here in just 1 minute. Excited to see everyone joining here on my screen. For those of you joining right now, we're going to be starting here super shortly. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today on this Thursday. Starting here real shortly, just 1 second. All right, let's get started. So hello, everyone, and welcome to Knotch and MikMak's Roundtable series. This is our series finale today. It's on the road ahead, our final one in this series. So as always, I'm Ryan Sloan, the Content and Communications Manager here at Knotch. And today we're bringing back some of your favorite panelists from the past weeks, as well as hearing from new voices and giving you a last chance to hear straight from the biggest brand leaders themselves. So get excited. And as always, this roundtable is bringing us together for an open and honest conversation so we can all learn from each other and grow together. So make sure to get those questions in that you have for either Rachel or Anda or any of our panelists that you can send to the Q&A box that Zoom has on the bottom of your screen. So now I'd like to introduce our hosts, Anda Gansca and Rachel Tipograph, as they lead us through today's conversation with brands like WeWork, Audi, Citi, Ford, Nextdoor, Wells Fargo, and more. So our first host today is Anda Gansca. She is the co-founder and CEO of Knotch, a content intelligence platform enabling companies like Amazon, Facebook, Walmart, Bank of America, Salesforce, and others to plan for breakthrough content, as well as measure and optimize it across channels. She's a regular thought leadership contributor to the trade media and industry at large, and she's been named to both Forbes and Inc.'s 30 Under 30 lists, Adweek's Young Influential list, Campaign's Female Frontiers list, and Adweek's Top 100 Creatives, just to name a few. And we also have Rachel Tipograph. She is the founder and CEO of MikMak, an enterprise marketing e-commerce platform helping brands better understand consumers by connecting digital investments to online retailer insights. She's been recognized as a leading innovator across the globe, including Forbes 30 Under 30 Who Are Changing the World, Marie Claire's 50 Most Influential Women in America, and Fast Company's Most Creative People in Business. So Anda and Rachel, for the very last time, take it away.
It feels bittersweet, doesn't it? It's been 10 weeks.
I can't believe it. 10 weeks is a lifetime.
Especially during a crisis.
I know. Well, I feel like we've gotten back to high school units of time where 3 months was like 3 years.
That's true. That's a good way of putting it.
But you know what I think I'm going to miss the most is Ryan's voice every Thursday. Webinars and radio. It's fantastic.
We're not going to have a reason to wash our hair anymore. What's going to happen to that?
I know. I feel bad for my roommates. Well, first of all, I want to thank Anda because really this is the brainchild of Anda and I'm just the person in the little motorcycle car that gets to ride along. But it's been amazing. Like the people that we brought together, the conversations that we've had. This is our 10th one. That means we did 20 hours of webinar, which is a lot of content. And I know, we get the letters every day, the impact that we've made. It's been quite special. So this won't be the last time that you hear from Anda and I, but we feel like taking a break from this conversation will actually make future conversations stronger in a few weeks. So you'll see us unite again. But we've covered a lot of ground together, Anda.
I know. And I think it's been actually, if nothing else, emotionally helpful for us to navigate this time together. It's been a forcing function to bring a lot of the best minds of the industry together and I guess make all of us feel a little bit less alone and a little bit less crazy. I've definitely made a lot of decisions around the things that I heard on the webinar. And so I appreciate the fact that you decided to organize this with me. Thank you, Rachel. I'm an introvert. I would not be able to do this without you. You bring the energy and the vibe to the forum. And so on that note, I know you have a lot of things to share, some of the things that we've heard in the last 10 weeks. So I'll pass it over to you because you'll do a much better job.
Yeah, so thanks to Team MikMak for pulling some of the points that have come out of the prior 9 sessions. For folks who've been with us, this will be a refresher. For new folks, here's a little summary. So, we've covered a lot of ground, but I think the consistent themes have been that we've talked about how to navigate uncertainty. And we've all decided that that is critical for us to be successful in our roles as individual contributors as well as leaders. But to do that, we have to focus on controlling what we can, making decisions that need to be made, be flexible, and plan accordingly. And that the leaders who will, quote unquote, win coming out of this are leaders who lead with empathy in addition to driving the business. And I think one of the things that we've all learned over the last 10 weeks is that as marketers, we have to start making multiple strategies, meaning we don't know what can happen in the future, and you need to now have a plan A, B, and C. From a content standpoint, which obviously we've been talking a lot about since our friends at Knotch are here with us, it's about ensuring that you're going to market with authentic messaging. And to do that, you have to go back to your brand's purpose or core. And that resonates also with internal communications. We heard a lot about how marketers are communicating internally. And then more in my universe with e-com, consumer demand for e-commerce is accelerated by 5 years, which means now brands have to accelerate their plans by 5 years. We heard a lot about that over the last few weeks. So that was my summary. Anda, did I miss anything?
I think the only other piece that I'd mention is, as we've navigated these topics over the course of the last 10 weeks, I feel like we started when the bomb just got dropped and everyone was trying to figure it out. And we were all quite reactive. And over the last 10 weeks, I've kind of observed as everyone has become actually a lot more strategic and actually data-driven in how they're thinking about the second half of the year. And so I'm excited. Today we have a few different industries on the line, and I'm excited to hear not only what the predictions are around how we think about marketing, but also what does it mean for these different industries. I'm excited. We have 3 major car brands on the line, and I'm excited to hear from them. What are they seeing in China and in Europe, so that we can all kind of live a little bit in the future. So yeah, I kind of want to make today about the road ahead and what we think is going to happen in the second half of the year. So on that note, I know you want to introduce our first speaker, so I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah, so before I bring up our first incredible speaker, rules of the road here. We are going to take questions from the audience. There's a Q&A function. Just put your question there, and throughout the next 2 hours, Anda and I will pull from there and have this incredible group of leaders address them. And that really is the only rule. So with that, Miriam in the house, head of marketing at Nextdoor. So excited to have you.
Thank you for having me. It's nice to see everybody. It's nice to be with other people in this new reality.
Absolutely. So I mentioned to you before we started, I've been thinking of you because you came from the travel industry, and now you're in the, I guess you would categorize Nextdoor as social network, technology, community enabling space. And so I'm thinking about that transformation from a leadership standpoint and just your relevance right now. I feel like Nextdoor has actually been in more headlines than ever before. And you're only a few weeks into your role.
Yeah, I started the role February 3rd. So I had 3 weeks, 1 week in San Francisco at headquarters, 1 week in Europe because we're an international company, and then 1 week in the New York office where I'm technically based before I started working from home. So now Chelsea in New York is basically my home/office. And yeah, the thing that's interesting about Nextdoor and the reason I ended up deciding to join Nextdoor was because their purpose was really to cultivate kindness and create neighborhoods people could rely on. And I like to tell the story. We've lived in Chelsea, minus the 4 years we moved to Chicago for the global Hyatt job. When we moved into the neighborhood in Chelsea 20 years ago, I had just had my firstborn, and I joined the Neighborhood Block Association. And in fact, I joined as the secretary of the Block Association, which, you know, when I say these words out loud, my teenagers, well, actually, they're like 18 and 21. They just roll their eyes. And really, for me, I sort of always believed that it mattered to not just say something, but be willing to act. And I thought, you know, knowing my neighbors and being involved and caring and willing to act made a difference. Interestingly, this block in Chelsea is the longest running block association in the history of New York. So these were hardcore activists, and it was sort of a lovely way to get introduced to the neighborhood and to the history. And, you know, Chelsea is obviously transformed in the last 30 years. So, you know, I think the idea of knowing the people near you and yet having sort of connective tissue that was wider, as a kid who grew up all over the world, you know, I sort of love being connected globally, but also very locally. And I think the thing about Nextdoor is it was created to connect you to your nearby neighbors with the idea of leveraging technology, but really with the goal of connecting you in person, right? So it was really an enabler that was intended to get you to know the people next to you so that you would actually meet them. And really a Pew study had come out that said increasingly more of us didn't know our next door neighbors. And so that's what prompted the founding of this company. And so what's fascinating is that now all of a sudden knowing your neighbors comes into real relief because as is the case often in pandemics, which we've experienced before, but not quite to this degree in a global scale in our lifetimes, is the people next door to you are the ones who are going to be able to come to your aid, right? And so it's been fascinating to see how that's played out in my about 100 days on the job.
Yeah. So I imagine like when you were entering the job, first 100 days, your plans were like meet my team, learn the business, figure out what we need to optimize. But instead this pandemic happens. So what has been the shift in focus in terms of the marketing strategies at Nextdoor during this time?
Yeah, well, so, you know, that's sort of the interesting thing is that, you know, you come in and really, you know, if you've been around enough, you know that the deal is you have to listen and learn for your first 90 days. You're not supposed to be ripping off Band-Aids. And so I don't think that changed in the sense that I really did spend time trying to understand what was happening. And I did have to do a 90-day view to the board. So, you know, you have that stream of work that happens regardless of the environment that you're in. And yet 3 weeks in, all of a sudden, you know, everybody was working around the clock, right? Everybody was focused on meeting the immediate need of consumers as they showed up, of our neighbors, really. And I categorize neighbors as your next door neighbors, your local businesses, your public agencies like the police, the World Health Organization. So it was really, I think one of the things, having done a lot of purpose work for the last 20 years, is that a lot of companies say they're purpose driven. And in moments like these, you actually learn whether that is in fact sort of just words on a card that people carry or in fact true, right? And I think one of the things that was super interesting was that people were really living their purpose. And, you know, in a lot of ways, that's a gift because that actually gets you to focus not on yourself and sort of the stress and anxiety that you might feel in the current situation, but on how you meet the needs of others. And that actually, in some crazy way, is a stress reducer because you're actually just being useful, right? And there is something about being useful. And fascinatingly, pretty early on the platform, we began seeing people wanting to be useful to others, right? So the incidence of people saying, how can I help? How can I run groceries? I'm able-bodied. Really increased exponentially by, you know, the third week that I was on the job. And that really then drove the design team and the product team and the engineering team to think about other ways that they would iterate the platform to meet that need real time, right? And so I think it's twofold, Rachel. You know, on the one hand, yeah, there are things that change, like you bring product to market much faster. I mean, I've been speaking to lots of different people when I have a minute, and everybody talks about how incredible innovation has been, right? People have been able to pivot and move much faster than they ever thought possible. When you have this really urgent need, and I say to people all the time, this is a real thing that's happening. It's not just a plan that somebody put together. People are dying, right? So the impact is real. So that was an incredible motivator for lots of people to figure out how to pivot their business. And on the same time, you still have the things that happen in the background, which is you have a board meeting and you got to give them a 90-day view as to what you're seeing and what the road ahead looks like as best as you can.
From marketing investment standpoint, like I imagine demand for Nextdoor has skyrocketed.
Mm-hmm.
So does that mean you pull back on marketing spend because it's organically happening, or do you elevate it? Like, how have you thought about investment in the brand during this time?
You know, I think for sure, daily active users and the number of people who were maybe sort of on the platform but not engaged has really just skyrocketed, right? So that is definitely a reality. On the flip side, yeah, it is an opportunity to think about your mix and think about whether you pull back on paid and lean into organic. But also for us, it's about do we actually begin to do more product marketing and brand marketing? So Nextdoor hasn't historically done tons of brand marketing. You know, I tell people in the company all the time, particularly as we're headquartered in California, in San Francisco, people in San Francisco know Nextdoor. When you get closer to New York City, less people know Nextdoor, right? So there is really still an opportunity for us to let people know that we exist from a brand perspective. So, you know, sometimes it's more of a shift rather than just totally throttling down in terms of paid versus organic.
And, you know, you're known to be one of the like strongest minds in the CMO community. And so I just want to pick your brain in terms of what you think will be forever changed about marketing because of COVID.
You know, I think when you live through something like this, where how you behave makes actual difference, right? Like real meaningful difference. I say to people all the time when they want to come onto the platform, it's like, this is not the time for platitudes or, you know, pretty videos, because people actually have a real need to be met. And so I think there was an instinct for some people originally to just go dark, right? And to say, okay, in marketing, we're going to just start saving, because also, you know, things aren't always great financially. But being there in a time of need is something people remember. And then how you show up, right? How do I not just show up to say I'm supporting, but actually do it in a way that adds real meaningful value? That, I think, is a thing that when you experience it and you see the results of that, right? You don't actually show up thinking, oh, that's going to benefit me, because frankly, you're just meeting the need in that moment. But I do think people become loyal as a result of that kind of a behavior. And when you experience that, I think it becomes it's like its own viral loop. So I do think that will change how we think about marketing moving forward, because you know, you actually have to meaningfully be able to add value. I mean, and an interesting thing that happened for us pretty early on is that Walmart reached out to us. And one of the things about Nextdoor is that you really only see your own neighborhood. So for me, I see Chelsea and I see the greater Greenwich Village, right? I don't see Marin or any place else. But everybody has to be verified. So getting on the platform isn't simply like a click. You actually have to be verified, so we know that you are who you are and that you live where you do. So it's very hyper local, and there's a high trust factor. So pretty early on, when we saw all these people wanting to help each other and people who needed help, the team actually created a help map. It was a map that used to be one we used for trick-or-treating, where people would pin themselves on the map so that you could figure out where the houses were to take the kids for trick-or-treating. They took that and they skinned that so that you could actually pin yourself, so that you could say, I'm on 21st and between 9th and 10th, so that people could actually visually see who was closest to them when they needed help or when they were offering help. And so, you know, that along with group functionality was really as a result of the organic behavior that you were seeing show up by neighbors on the platform. So then, you know, Walmart came in and they said, you know what, we'd love to figure out how to partner with that. And for them, it was twofold. They wanted to pin themselves where they had stores on the map so that people could then say, I'm going to do a run at Walmart. Can I help run groceries for you? Because either you can't get out or because you're homeschooling your kid and I can actually do that errand for you. It was twofold. One, they were giving information that was vital to people, like their hours and information that consumers needed, but it also reduced foot traffic in store when you were really trying to socially distance, not just for your guests, but for the people who were showing up to work there, right? And so it's that kind of a thing that I think we're gonna see more of, like, I think, Anda, you were saying about being data driven, right? It's like that data where you can actually get hyper local and get that information to people in a proximal fashion is going to be something I think that we will continue to see, because I think local is going to really be the thing, right? I think we're going to come out of this on the other side really connected to our local communities.
Yeah, we had the CMO of Zillow on, so we talked a lot about local. I love that insight. increase the average order value, but decrease footsteps.
Yeah, right. It's twofold.
Yeah.
And so it's been amazing to watch that, to actually watch that play out.
Well, thank you. If folks don't have Nextdoor downloaded, download it. When you talk about future brand opportunities, I always say that Nextdoor is going to blow up in that sense. But I'm very excited to see you at the helm of it. So thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Anda, who is next?
Well, I was thinking about how I could create an offer from the company of the next speaker. If you guys don't have an Audi, definitely buy an Audi immediately. But no, sorry, buy a Ford. There we go. No, you can. We're gonna have 3 different cars on the line today, so I have to be very impartial. I will not declare my personal preference. So Tara, welcome. It's so great to see you and so great to have you on.
Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
So you joined Audi about a year ago, and you're a total outsider to the auto industry, which is actually quite uncommon. I feel like a lot of the folks that I meet in the auto industry have really grown within the auto industry. And you came in as the comms leader of Audi in North America. And when the crisis hit, I remember you told me that you basically were put in charge of the task force that would then communicate with everyone internally, but I'm assuming also everyone externally. So I'm curious, kind of a 2-layer question. I'm curious, how did it feel for you to kind of come in from the outside in, and then 2, to be in charge of this crisis and the communications around it and the projects around it, especially as an outsider to this industry?
Yeah, well, it was definitely one of the things that was appealing to me about joining Audi was the fact that, the auto industry was expected to change more in the next, 5 to 10 years than it had changed in the, 100 years before. So me coming in with an outside perspective, I think, that was definitely why I was hired, to bring in just a different perspective, some different experience, and to mix things up a little bit. So to blend with a team that, had a great background in automotive, but for me to kind of challenge the way we were doing things and offer a fresh perspective. So I came in right away before COVID-19, where we had a lot of grand plans about all the things we were going to innovate and how we were going to do things differently. And obviously, COVID-19 throws a whole new element into the mix of how you manage all that. And I think, and I can talk a lot about this, I think it's the blend of the realism and identifying the challenges and being really honest about what those are in a time like COVID-19, but, being equally as optimistic and looking at the opportunity that it creates as well to listen, like, you can't do things the way you always did them before. So it helps bring a lot of people along who, it's easy to keep doing things in a way that they've worked for a long time. But now when you can't do that, you bring everyone aboard to try new things and be able to test and learn and be able to take chances on things, which has been an exciting time, even amidst a pandemic that's happening. So on one hand, lots to talk about there, but also lots to talk about on the crisis front and managing that workforce for sure.
I feel like most days I keep repeating this. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times, because every day feels like some type of intense journey between those 2 extreme data points. As you kind of were brought on board to be this change agent, not to say that this crisis can really be good in any way, but to some extent to kind of play with that idea, what are some of those behaviors that you wanted to see happen internally that you think this crisis has really helped accelerate?
Yeah, well, I think there's a couple of really good examples. From a team perspective, I think you could look at, a time like this where, everyone has those budget conversations and starts having to prioritize activities, and people need liquidity in their business. So you start being challenged with some of those asks. And, you can look at that from a negative perspective of, what's being potentially taken away or, reprioritized. Or you could look at that as an opportunity of, okay, how are we going to get really scrappy, really creative here? And I think with my, immediate team, what I saw, because we brought a lot of positive energy to it, is more collaboration than we had ever seen before, people getting really excited about being able to bring new ideas and execute them right away. So, whether that was little things that people were doing that they can execute literally without even a budget. So things like creating Audi coloring books and Zoom backgrounds and all the little things that you could quickly turn on, but people felt, wow, I can, quickly do something that makes a difference. We looked at things like we can, it's very a historic practice in the auto industry to leverage your fleet, and we quickly shuffled and looked at how we were leveraging our fleet a lot differently. Instead of doing these one-off loaners, how could we make this a more meaningful use of the fleet? So we did a lot of philanthropic work, and I think that'll forever change how we leverage the fleet going forward. But then you look at more of these strategic topics like, in our business, we were set for a transformation to move into the electric vehicle space. So by 2025, our plans had always been to have 30% of our vehicles be electric. But now when you go through COVID-19, it's bringing up these other elements of having people look at electric in a new way. So from a sustainability perspective, for example, we've all seen the stories of, reduced air pollution down to a personal level of, I know I've never appreciated going for a walk outside and feeling more connected to nature than I ever did before, now that I kind of can work out of a home office. So I've also never felt more pride when I can be driving, my e-tron around and feeling like, I can make a big contribution that way. I think also from, a strategy perspective, we were always looking at, how do we, with electric vehicles being new, emotionalize that story for people. But one of the new things that has come up is just the sense of control also that people are after, and what an EV could provide in that sense. So the fact that you can plug in at home, you don't have to, go to a gas station, that you are able to have that control. It's like the same feeling that people feel when they stock up of their 2 weeks of groceries. The fact that you can recharge your car at home it's a whole new level of giving consumers, again, just another element of control in a situation where they feel like they have a lack of control.
Yeah,
so there's other parts of the story that are coming to life.
I don't know if this is only a New York thing, but I mentioned this to you on the phone that so many people I know are now really wanting to buy a car more than ever before. And I think it goes back to control, but also to the idea that Mariam was talking about just being local and traveling locally. So I'm curious, as you guys think about, I'm going to ask everyone who's in the auto industry this, as you guys think about creative, how do these notions of control, of staying local, how are they starting to show up? And does it mean that you're going to have a much more intense paid presence in the second half of the year?
Yeah, I think I was talking about the fleet before and the programs we're going to do. I mean, you touched on it. I think in the industry now, we have a lot of people who are a little hesitant with mass transportation, for sure. And you have a lot of people that may not be doing the same level of global travel that they were doing for a little bit of time. And there's this desire that'll come back. We're seeing kind of the reemergence of that summer road trip. The idea of wanting to kind of explore your local area. So I think in a lot of what we do, a lot of the content we bring to life is like, how do we get that, the auto industry has always given a lot of real life experiences, and we've done a lot of real life experiential events. And now we have to look at how do you take that and how do you create kind of not just some content that lives on social or that you can virtually share with people, but how do you get to like the depth of the experience? How do you make it kind of an exploratory journey? And that's going to be content that, has a very much a local feel, has a, high emotional feel. And again, doesn't just present people with content, but how are you getting them to feel like they're experiencing that content?
100%. I love how many times you said content and emotion. So one more question for you, Tara. As you look at Europe and Asia, what are the data points what are kind of the signals that you're really listening to, especially as it comes to how you're forming your comms and marketing strategy?
Yeah, it's great. You know, this is one of the times where it's so beneficial to be part of a global company so that you can be talking to colleagues in different markets who may be, you know, a little more advanced in their timing of where they are in this pandemic. So you know, there's lots of best practices of how, you know, we're transforming the industry to take more of the car buying experience online, a lot of lessons from China on that front. Obviously very different markets. So when you look at how they're handling the pandemic, how we are handling the pandemic, the fact that in the US, you know, you mentioned the task force before, when it comes to communications, even with employees, you know, how we return to the space, how we, you know, adopt remote working, you have to look in the US at not only, you know, federal mandates and state mandates, but it's county mandates, and there's a lot of complexity. So we get, you know, a bit of an indication from China and Europe about, you know, best practices they've put into place, but then you have all these interesting dynamics and complexities of being in the US. You know, our business, we have 60 offices in 20 states. So any communication to folks, there are, you know, some consistent messages of how we want to approach and handle these times, but then it has to be so customized to what you're going to do kind of in each office based on, you know, what's happening in the community there.
That makes sense. Well, thank you so much, Tara. Really appreciate you sharing your thoughts. Please stay on because we're going to jump into a Q&A soon. But next up is Rachel to introduce the poll of the day.
All right, let's pull up this poll. So everyone, please vote. How are you reshaping your marketing budget for the rest of 2020? Are you moving it all to digital? Are you moving part of it to digital? Are you cutting it partially? Or are you just keeping it the same? Let us know and we will reveal the results in a few minutes.
Okay, so without further ado, I would love to welcome our next speaker, Roger. Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Hi.
Hi, Roger. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Ready to
So, Roger is a man in need of a vacation. I will start with that. He most recently was at Sprint and navigated first the incredible journey that that brand had before the acquisition talks even began, and then the acquisition talks. And now, Roger, you've decided to join WeWork, which is definitely not going to be, you know, the easiest brand to turn around. So I would love to hear from you. First of all, what made you jump in and want to take on this really exciting challenge? And when are you going to take a vacation? When are you going back to Spain?
Well, I guess probably they only call me when there's a problem, right? So I learned. Why nobody calls me to join a company where it's just growing, right? And everything's
I know, it's crazy.
So yeah, well, look, well, first, thanks for having me. Look, yeah, it's been a tough journey at Sprint, and we had 3 years of a tough turnaround and repositioning the company, but taking it back to growth, and then finally merging with T-Mobile. So look, I decided to join WeWork, and actually I finished at Sprint on my handover on a Thursday, and I was joining WeWork on a Monday, so I had a 3-day vacation. So maybe that I think
too much.
I'm gonna get going with that. So because I don't see when I'm gonna take the next one, honestly. But now look, WeWork ultimately it's a disruptor and an innovator in the global landscape on real estate, and there's a lot of opinions that WeWork model is not going to survive, and actually I like the idea of the challenge of proving everybody wrong, hopefully, and being involved in another turnaround. It's an amazing brand. Obviously, there's been a lot of negative news around WeWork in the last year and a half. Most of them are not really related to its business model or the ability to provide a good service to its members. It's been around SoftBank, around the CEO, around so many other things, right? So I think the platform is amazing, and the fact all this crisis is just providing the opportunity to reinvent itself one more time, and to seek what's the next disruption in this in this particular in its value proposition and in the way that it can go to market. So I found it a fascinating opportunity. So so here I am. It's been 3 weeks already.
It's such an interesting industry and market. It's obviously going through a massive disruption right now. Not only are we not going to the office, but I think a lot of us are also rethinking what the office even means. So with that transition, you know, I find myself as a business owner thinking about a more flexible office, a place that is kind of like an opt-in where you can go work from there if you want to, but you can stay at home if you want to. Do you think that mentality is prevalent across other business owners? And if so, how do you think it influences the WeWork model and the future, the success of that model?
I think that's part of the reinvention that needs to happen, right? Because you can always look at this as a big threat, like, oh, are people gonna even go to an office, right? Or you can see this as the opportunity to create a new standard of what work means, and WeWork is the world leader in terms of innovative thinking on that, and that's where I think I see the opportunity. And think about several things that are going on, right? First is that in the past, most companies still have their own real estate, right? So it's a fixed capex, it's a fixed cost, it's very inflexible. And now I think everybody's noticing how important it would have been to have a flexible model, right? So just imagine the amount of companies that are gonna start being even more attracted than before to a flexible model where you can scale up or down, where you don't have fixed investment upfront, and you can treat this as an OpEx. So the amount of companies that can get attracted with this business model innovation, if you will, that has nothing to do with the design. It has to do really about innovating in the business model. I think there's a big trend there. Then there's another trend that can also go in our favor, which is the distributed workforces. I think it's also along the same lines of what you were discussing, right? Which is ultimately not everybody needs to come to the same headquarters, right? So what if there's a neighborhood office where you can go, where you can connect with other people, where you can have the office resources but you don't really need to commute, right? You can think about that like in a city scale, but also in a global scale, right? So why not having a space where your employees can work around the world, and it's not really a headquarters, right? So you can diminish commuting, you can diminish travel, and WeWork has all the scale to offer this solution both in cities and around the world. So there are these two, and on top of that, so you're gonna still need creative spaces where people can work together, and WeWork has already been a reference for that. And I think companies that are gonna have to grow again are gonna need this kind of creative and productive spaces, right? But ultimately, it's going to be a combination, right, of work from home, work from a space that's close to where you are, and I think that there's an advantage for on this WeWork model for everybody in a company, right? The CHRO is going to like the productivity and usually satisfaction of the employees. The CFO is going to like the innovation in the business model.
Yeah.
So there's a platform that I think we can develop, and we're working very humbly now to make sure that we are going to be able to communicate that message and to adapt our value proposition to that.
And I'm assuming there's also something to be said about the safety of everyone there. I think controlling the safety, you know, I think about it going back to the office. There's a lot we have to do as a company to ensure that we continue to maintain that. So outsourcing that is actually an interesting and probably better way to do it if you're a relatively small company. I'm curious, as states are slowly starting to come back, and obviously you're an international company, and so you have data from around the world. How are you thinking about your marketing mix? Like, how much of it is it brand and trying to deal with some of the brand equity issues? How much of it is performance marketing and just being a bit more transactional about it?
Yeah. So, well, and I've been only 3 weeks, but the first thing I did was basically reduce our advertising spend, basically to figure out a few things before we ultimately this crisis diminishes our the need to go after customers for some weeks, simply because there's naturally less traffic, and also we need to control our costs, right? So I've been working on the foundational media and creative strategies, so that then when we have a big comeback, we can invest our money properly, right? So that's first. That in terms of our brand versus performance. So we are working both fronts, right? But from the brand perspective, there are two very important messages that we started to work on. And the first is related to safety, right? So we need to make sure that people understand that, look, at a certain moment when you want to come back to work and you're going to need to do this, you want to do it in the place that has the best safety standards based on scientific analysis. And we, again, are the world's thought leader on that. So we have improved our sanitization standards. We have created these professional distancing rules, basically reorganizing the layouts of all the buildings so that you've got distancing, you've got hygiene, you've got all the way in and way out designed in a way that minimizes the risk of or improves the safety standard, right? So, and this is an important message that's, maybe it's not branding, right? It's very pragmatic and very functional driven, but this is the campaign that we have today. It's all about come back to work in safety, right? And in parallel, we've got another message that it's all about the trust issue that you were mentioning, right? So we need to make sure to show that we actually care about what's going on. So we've got a program called WeWork for Good, which basically gives free space to companies that are fighting the COVID pandemic around the world. And we're going to start to showcase these members that have been doing an amazing job, because the work has not really stopped, right? So these companies have been working 3 times the intensity than the rest of the companies, and they've been doing this in the WeWork offices, and we want to showcase that. And that obviously goes more into branding, right? So it's a combination of a very pragmatic message and a more of a brand, recovering brand trust to the brand through how we have been helping these companies. And very soon we're gonna add next month some. We're working on a grant program to give even money to companies that have been helping the communities and the world at large during this pandemic. Again, with the idea to build some brand equity and some goodwill into the brand.
That makes sense. Well, thank you so much, Roger. Good luck with the turnaround. And if you can actually stay on, I know there's going to be a few questions. We are going to jump into a Q&A after our next speaker. But Rachel, did you want to maybe share the poll results and see where we are before I move on to the next speaker?
Let's do it. There's a lawnmower outside of my window, so hopefully.
You can't hear it. All good. Okay, cool. Team Knotch, show us the results.
Well, it seems like folks are moving part of it to digital. Some are moving all of it. Some are cutting it. Kind of an even spread.
What are they doing with the other part that's not digital? That's my question.
Direct mail. We're doing so much swag sending right now.
It's interesting. My co-founder still doesn't allow me to do swag, so I need to fix that.
I'm telling you, remember the last time I saw him, I'm like, you're wrong with this stuff.
I know, trust me, he's a hipster. I don't know what to do. He's just like very much against the grain, so. But I like your sweatshirt. Show it to everyone.
Always wearing MikMak.
There we go. Okay, so excited to welcome Michael. Michael and I met at a Forbes CMO conference a few years ago when he actually walked over to me and said, I've been to Transylvania, which is where I'm from. And I said, how the hell have you been to Transylvania? What did you do to deserve to go to Transylvania? And it sounds like you were actually working in that region. So Michael, you've been in the automotive industry for how many years?
Yeah, 20 plus years.
There we go. And what was the automaker that brought you to Transylvania?
Actually, I was working for Arthur Andersen at the time, which was a global accounting and consulting firm. So I was there back in the early 90s, 93 through 95. So
and were you
time for Romania.
Were you there to check out Dacia, the local car manufacturer?
In fact, I actually owned an Aro, which was
Oh,
the Romanian version of an SUV at the time.
yes, it still exists.
Still exists, yeah. It's actually a pretty good vehicle.
Yes, I agree. So, Michael, when I first met you, you were at Kia, and you were running marketing as well as operations. Now you're at Ford and you're running Lincoln in the Americas. Am I right?
Yeah, North America. So Canada, Mexico, and the US.
Got it. So I would love to hear from you. I know, Ford has a big presence in China. I would love to hear maybe some of the things that you're seeing there and how those data signals are informing how you're thinking about the reopening in the US, if at all.
Yeah, great. So I'm going to speak specifically to the Lincoln brand because China and the US are our top two markets for the Lincoln brand, and that's what I'm most close to. And it's interesting because we are learning a lot from them. They are about 6 weeks ahead of us in terms of how consumers were using their vehicles or not using their vehicles during the COVID pandemic. So we were able to learn a lot through the data that we are capturing from our vehicles. So we could see quickly a huge drop-off in terms of vehicle usage. I mean, people basically just stopped using their vehicles. And as China started to pick up, we were going into our trough. But now we're starting to come out of it. And we're basically following the same trend that China followed. So it's been fascinating to watch. We learned a lot from them in terms of what consumers were looking for from a sales standpoint, because people had a lot of time on their hands. So they were going online to learn about the vehicles. Mm-hmm. So we quickly developed a virtual showroom as more and more of our dealerships here in the United States closed or had limited ability to service customers. We had an experience center in Dallas that closed. We converted it to a virtual showroom. So customers could go online, schedule an appointment, and then have somebody, a sales consultant or product specialist, give them a vehicle tour at their time, when they wanted it. We also learned that customers, because they were sitting at home, they thought to themselves, boy, I've been neglecting to get my car serviced. I should really get it serviced, but I don't necessarily want to go to the dealership. So we had a service called Pickup and Delivery, where a customer can go on to the Lincoln Way app and schedule an appointment. Somebody comes and picks up the vehicle, takes it back, gets it serviced, and then brings it back. So from a communication standpoint, we were getting ready to launch one of our all-new vehicles, the Corsair. We quickly changed the communications message to focus on our pickup and delivery service. Again, another lesson that we learned from China in terms of what they were looking for. We also learned in terms of, as the dealerships were coming back online, customers wanted to feel safe if they were going to go into the dealership. And so we've provided all of our dealers with PPE type of equipment, the glasses, the goggles, the shields, the masks, a lot of disinfectants, things along those lines. The shields that you can put up as barriers as people are talking. So a lot of equipment to help our dealers get ready for when customers do actually come into the dealerships. But we also saw a significant number of people saying, I only want to purchase a vehicle online or remotely. So we were able to quickly to get our dealers to develop, or we had a software system that we had provided to them. They quickly got that up and running. We went basically from very few sales online end to end earlier this year to in May, we're at about 35% of our sales being online. So another huge shift and another learning from China.
So I hope you don't mind that I'm going to ask you this question, but it sounds like there's just so much more of this direct to consumer relationship that you are building as a brand. And of course, the dealers are part of that. Do you think the world goes back to the system of dealers, or do you think we just double down on this direct to consumer trend?
Yeah, it's a great question and one that the industry has been facing for a really long time. But when we look at the importance of what that dealer serves for the customer, remember, these vehicles are highly complex machines. It's not so easy just to give somebody the keys to a new vehicle and say, hey, good luck, have at it. There's so much technology now into these vehicles. It still requires that human-to-human interaction to help demonstrate all of the features and benefits of these vehicles. A lot of the safety technology really needs to be explained so people can understand it, so they don't think that maybe there's something wrong with their vehicle once they drive it off the lot. So I still see the dealer playing an important role in that. Granted, a lot of, from the searching to submitting a lead to get a quote to the negotiation, a lot of that will still happen. But I think when the vehicle's actually delivered, there will be some sort of human connection, and the dealer will serve that. And then on the service side, you're always going to need to have your vehicle serviced. So we still need to have our dealers fulfilling that role for our customers.
That makes sense. I know that there's been this trend in China that, the number of divorces has skyrocketed as a result of COVID, and we've laughed about that. But do you see that the number of auto sales, the just number of cars that get sold has skyrocketed as well? And is it more of a V-shaped or a U-shaped recovery, to the extent that you can share?
No, it's, the data is there publicly. We saw not just Lincoln and Ford, but all manufacturers saw a huge drop in March. The premium industry, which Lincoln plays in and Audi does as well, we saw an even greater drop than mass market. Because if you think about it, a premium luxury buyer doesn't necessarily have to go out and buy a vehicle. A lot of mass market consumers, they need those vehicles to help them get to their jobs on a day-to-day basis. So we're actually, the premium industry is coming back slower than the mass market industry is as well. Again, with the stock market, with COVID, with unemployment, a lot of people are just taking, pause to say, I'm going to wait and see how this plays out. But we still expect by the end of the year, we won't get back to where we anticipated 2020 would be, but we're well on the trajectory to improve sales significantly.
That's really exciting to hear. So my final question to you is, how does that factor into your H2 marketing planning?
Yeah, so the vehicle that I mentioned earlier that we were just getting ready to launch, so we had to shift the launch timing to the third quarter. So that wasn't something we had planned, and what we had planned to do in the third quarter is then being shifted as well. We're definitely spending more time and effort in the digital space and developing content, particularly as people continue to stay at home. The challenge we have is it's tough not being able to go out and develop new content because of all of the shelter-in-place activities. So it's requiring us at our agencies to be very creative, relying on our customers as well to provide content as well that we could potentially use, relying on some of our partners like Serena Williams or Matthew McConaughey, so a lot of other things that we wouldn't necessarily have planned, we're now pivoting and doing those sorts of things.
That makes sense. Do you know Matthew McConaughey? Can I be friends with him?
I have not met him personally, but he's a great brand ambassador for us.
I know. Every time I watch those ads, because I love Lincoln, obviously, but also because I want to see Matthew. Okay, yeah, thank you so much, Michael.
If I could, now that you're in the Hamptons, you're going to need a vehicle. So I guess it's...
Oh, there we go.
between Tara and I, we're going to have to, or maybe we can get the voters to...
No, I was going to say, I'm going to fight you on that one.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm getting the sales pitch. Well, wait, I'm waiting for discounts. So maybe just DM me. We'll do a bid.
There you go.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Michael.
Absolutely. Thanks for inviting me.
Of course. Rachel, I'm going to turn it over to you. I know we want to do a Q&A, but your call if you want to take on the next speaker or jump into the Q&A first.
No, I'm feeling the vibe for the Q&A. It's time for the grid.
Let's do it. Okay, so we're going to go into grid view. Hi, Tarek. Good to see you. Okay, so Rachel, do you want to take the first question? Because I've been talking for quite a while.
Yeah. Well, let's start a little broad. So this is from anonymous attendee. What is one consumer need you've seen arise from this pandemic that you think is here to stay? Anyone from this Brady brunch want to start?
Excessive toilet paper need. I don't know where that came from, but that was fascinating.
If I could just say one thing, the one thing I see is that the basic human nature for people to have some sort of relationship or some sort of contact with other people is really resonating. And I think we're seeing that with, WebEx is great. We're doing a lot. We're much more efficient. But boy, our team members, our customers, our clients, they're telling us, you know what, I still want some sort of human contact. It's just part of basic nature. So I think we're going to have to balance that as we go forward, to address the COVID issues, but also address the human nature issues.
Interesting. Roger?
Yeah, and well, thanks, Michael. I couldn't agree more that human contact is so important to push forward, like new projects, to put creativity to work together. But I think this is going to come back, but it's going to come back differently, right? And I think the usage of digital tools, it's probably it's gonna probably leapfrog 5 years, right? So I think we moved up all the ability to use digital tools in our daily life. This is here to stay, and it's going to affect each and every industry and also ours, right? So people are gonna still go to offices, but I think using digital tools is going to enable different ways of using it. Like, for example, distributed workforces around the city. That's gonna change the way that people see real estate. Now, I don't think that things are just going to stop. Like in this case, people are not gonna stop going to the office. It's just things are gonna be done differently. And I think the same logic applies with every category problem.
From a communications perspective, it's interesting because here we're not in person yet. In some ways, we're getting kind of a deeper connection into people. So you have kind of leaders of an organization and you get to see them in their home setting. You hear their kids in the background, you hear their dog. And I think that connection into the other parts of people's lives becomes more important in leadership and in the communication realm. And that's internally for your employees, but that's also external facing as well. And then just purely from a customer delivery, it's interesting. I agree they'll want those elements of those in-person engagements, but all the services that we're creating, such as we have Audi at your door and the kind of touchless delivery. So maybe the touchless part becomes a little less relevant when we have a vaccine, but that kind of instant gratification of getting, in addition to all the trends we've been seeing for a couple of years now around delivery, but then all those other more traditional industries that didn't necessarily have that level of delivery service yet. I think you'll see them continue to offer those elements in their mix.
Yeah, I have one other thing to add, which actually gives me a lot of worry for the future of the global economy. And it's that, that for a lot of the core services that we experience in our lives, it's going to take fewer people to do them. And businesses have been operating in a mode that is kind of delayered and deconstructed. And just my son is having orthopedic surgery next week, and so we've had this combination of in-person examination and telemedicine. And when we spoke to the surgeon yesterday via telemedicine, his assistant was on the phone, and she was saying that they're serving as many patients as they used to, but it's alternating between virtual and physical because it's only physical when it has to be. Yet there are 75% fewer people working in the office, right? That are needed to kind of run the operations, to make things tick, to make things hum. And I think that we're going to see this trend that a lot of businesses require fewer people to operate. And so then the big question is going to be, where do other business ideas in the economy open up that can create migrations of these workforces that are no longer needed to function?
That's a very provocative thought. And how are we going to upskill all these workers in the new economy? I mean, Tarek, are you seeing the same thing? A huge part of Petco's business is services. So are you doing the same amount with fewer people? Like, how are you thinking about that?
Or reinventing in the same way you're hearing automotive folks talk about changes around how you engage with customers. We will not have a training business that looks the same after this. And that's probably not a bad thing, actually, because I think we're actually going to reinvent in ways that will make it actually, in some ways, even more scalable. So we're piloting right now virtual training. Right? The fact that I can't get into a store to meet with a trainer doesn't stop the puppy from chewing on my shoes and for me being frustrated and wanting to teach them not to. So we're launching a virtual component to that, and the success of being able to do that ultimately could be a much larger scale business, frankly, as you move into almost what is the Peloton model of a dog trainer look like. That's a very different approach. I don't think we will go back from that. I think there will be elements of that are meaningful, but I think these are driving all of us to create intervention that is not just about solving the immediate problem, but potentially gaining us insight to create even greater value for our customers.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious, just one more question that I want to throw out to everyone. What do you think are the attributes of the companies that become stronger through this? And I'm not talking counter-cycle companies whose products are going crazy right now. I'm talking like internal attributes of companies. And in particular, I'm curious, do you guys think there's a marketing investment that stays the same, that grows during this time? Or do you think that marketing doesn't really matter in navigating? I mean, I know you're going to say it matters, but anyway, I'm curious. How do you think of that as a leading or lagging indicator of success? No one wants to jump in and help. Michael?
Yeah, I would say, obviously, those companies that are quick to recognize the issue and can pivot and change their messaging, but also the products and services that they offer to consumers, I think will be those that are winning. You can see that with the Walmarts and the Targets and the Amazons. I mean, how quickly they were to address the issues that consumers had as the economy was shutting down. Those companies that I think that have the best consumer research departments that can really dig deep into all of the data that's out there, and there's so much, and can glean those really unique ideas or thoughts and then convert those into products and services the fastest will be the winners.
I love that. Thank you.
Yeah. And I would say at a high end, purpose has never been more important. Those companies that not only have their purpose defined, express that purpose in a meaningful way, work in service of their customers rather than simply try to sell them, and innovate to add meaningful value and demonstrate that they've learned something. And then I think to your question about the role of marketing, I think it's more critical than ever, not just as a marketer, but actually beyond what marketing sphere has traditionally been. I think we're going to play a very critical role across other parts of the operation, whether that's customer service, which I think is going to be more important than ever. And I think you're going to see the next phase of what customer support and customer service and customer care, true care, actually starts to look like. The role of using the data and being more next best thoughtful purchase support and thinking about how you support customers. And I think our sphere as marketers is just going to continue to expand to think about those things rather than just some of the external programming approaches that maybe the investment's done before.
So customer service, storytelling / purpose / content, I'm just inserting those words because it serves me, and data, and very fast understanding of what the consumer wants and needs.
Yeah, and I would add, to reiterate what Rachel said in the beginning summary about, resilience and empathy. And I think leadership of organizations more important than ever before. bringing in talent that's resilient, creating a company that's adaptable. I mean, the pace of change no way slows down. The complexity continues to grow. So people who kind of look at that through the lens of being really optimistic and see it as an opportunity, I think those are the companies that are going to succeed. And at a most basic level, I always say the most important thing is just like the connection to people. So whether that's your customer or your internal employees, it's about, you know, being able to be vulnerable with people, understand like a deep level of empathy for not just identifying what their challenges are, but how people are feeling, what people are thinking, and just relating to that. You know, that leadership is just more important than ever.
My secret / not so secret hope for this next generation of leaders is that this finally gives us the permission to actually be human and vulnerable and genuine and empathetic, whereas I think the former generation of leaders was always expected to be infallible and strong and always know exactly what the right thing to do is. And I've appreciated the break from that stereotype that this crisis has created. So thank you all. I'm going to turn it over to Rachel now because she is going to interview our next guest.
Yes.
Over to you.
Well, Tarek, this is part 2 of you and I on this webinar. Thank you for joining. Tarek,
can you hear us?
did we lose him? Hello. All right. So you were alluding to some of the innovation work that's happening at Petco and virtual dog training. I mean, the Peloton of pets, that already feels like a multi-billion-dollar opportunity. What else are you cooking on?
Well, look, I think it's like a lot of the conversations that folks were talking about, we're being led by, you know, how do you address the immediacy of the need? And so, you know, in the analog to how the you know, how you're addressing service on an automobile, we've also had to move quickly on certain things. We were already working on curbside pickup, but we are now national with that and ensuring that we're doing, and now we're adding additional technology overlay to it to make sure that's a meaningful experience. So it's not just curbside, but how do you get just in time notification that the customer is there and create a process around that, right? So those are things that we're already working on. The training one is significant. Many of the medical analogs that you'll see that were, I think, ramping, but have really taken off during this. You know, if you think about Teladoc and how many of us have engaged now with medical practitioners via Zoom technology, we're applying much of that. Already were, but it's accelerating in terms of what we're doing with veterinarian medicine and support for our customers. And that will be something that will continue to play in terms of, it's been an accelerator. People have asked me, well, how has our strategy changed? It hasn't changed. It's actually accelerated what was our existing strategy to become a health and wellness company. And this will allow us to exert how we support some of those things. And so, you know, using technology in a way that provides support for our customers is just going to keep motivating us.
And where did like this investment money come from? Like I imagine in the Petco operating plan, you probably had to shift budget from somewhere to accelerate these programs.
Some of them were in pilot mode, and so it was, well, the pilot's good enough, let's go. And in some ways, I think one of the things that we've learned is how to get comfortable with expediency of learning in this environment. I think that is also something that was already happening, right? Of how do we use the data, but sometimes that data was slowing us down too. I think in our case, there were a couple of examples where things that might have taken 6 months, you know, out of necessity and need for our customers, took a week, and we stood them up. And so some of them weren't resource allocation. Other ones were, you know, all of us on a daily basis, and not just during an environment like this. It's compound environment like this. Have to ask ourselves, what do you stop, start, continue, right? And so there's strategic decisions about what are things that made a whole lot of sense pre-COVID that might not have made sense during COVID or post-COVID. You put those things down and you reinvest accordingly to where it's going to add value to your customer.
Mm-hmm. You know, when you were on last time, you talked a lot about your e-com business and how people were stocking up. Now that the stock up period is over, what's been the evolution of what consumers are buying for their pets?
Well, look, I think there's a couple dimensions that have gone, and thankfully the business has continued to find our way through this, right? No one's out there talking about, shouldn't say retail, anyone talking about how you make your way through, as opposed to you're being off the charts. It's continued to grow our e-com business. There's dimensions of that e-com business, like others, that have continued to grow as well. So repeat delivery or subscription-based refill ordering has continued to increase. Understanding customer behavior has been one that's interesting in terms of that digital behavior. And I guess I wasn't hugely surprised this, but the data is now starting to come in to support it, which is that's actually transcending demographics too. Our most recent data is showing that, yes, your grandparents actually are figuring out how to do some of this shopping online, and they are moving through the process of it. And so I think we had some biases that frankly were not all that accurate. I think we're now seeing that those are being taken on. So we've seen an age up in some of those areas of usage. But our brick and mortar business has continued to play a significant role, not only in terms of what people were doing in the stores that are open, but how we're using our buy online, pick up in store. And so that becomes one critical area. The other one that's been critical for us is the expansion of ship from store. And so using our stores as local and regional, so just mini distribution centers, has been a critical component of the e-com growth as well, right? Because it allows you to maintain your window of delivery period when people are needing it. And that's been really powerful for us. So where we've had competitors who have slipped to 7 to 10 day windows of delivery, we've been able to, for the most part, maintain a 2 to 3 day delivery window for almost all of our categories.
We do a lot of work in alcohol, obviously, as well as pets, but something that we saw in alcohol is the most important thing right now is delivery time.
Yeah.
Followed by price. Are you seeing that too?
Look, I think price has always been somewhat of a dimension in our category, but I think uniqueness of offering is also something that's a little bit different in our world. So we do have a number of brands that are exclusive and unique to us that's continuing to provide value to us. I think ease, convenience, and ability to how I want, when I want, the way I want was important before this. I think it's just been expedited. In our case, I think the other part of it is there's been a tremendous number of both new customer acquisition as a result of our ability to get things to folks. Mm-hmm. So now the question is, do you keep them? Mm-hmm. We've also got a lot of new parents. You and I were chatting before this started, and there is upwards of 500,000 new pet families through this period. We thought we might have a crisis on our hands, and instead, Americans stepped up and cleared shelters. They either adopted or fostered these pets. And now the opportunity for us is to turn those fosters into failing fosters and into full-time pet parents, as we call them, when we convert them from foster to adoption. And that's a real opportunity to support them.
That's crazy.
Yeah. It's actually tremendous. We thought we were going to have a real issue on our hands, and try and adopt or foster a pet right now. It's not an easy thing to do. The shelters are, had a tremendous amount of support.
No, absolutely. Let's talk about how you're managing the overall marketing team. So headquarters San Diego, but you've always been someone who's bouncing between New York and San Diego. Now everyone's remote. 10 weeks in, how has your work culture evolved?
I'm really proud of how it's evolved. I think all of us tell stories of how necessity creates, seamless transition. All the things we thought we couldn't possibly do, that when you have to, you find a way to do them. And I'm really proud of how not only the marketing organization, but our company has evolved. We just recently did a sentiment study with our employees to find out how they were managing. And I got to tell you, I was shocked, and happily so, to see just how high the numbers were on the belief that they were able to collaborate effectively, the belief that they were able to be effective and efficient. Some real important factors that I thought would have been good, but they were really strong. And I think, people have found the way to, like I say, innovate and move through it. And whoever was talking about earlier, I think this has brought down the wall of not only brand vulnerability, but human vulnerability of leadership in the way that we work. And I think that's something I do hope stays, irrespective of whether that goes back into a physical office environment or whether that continues to be from a
a virtual perspective. I hope we get to continue to maintain that kind of human and authentic perspective of each other, our lives, and what we were able to bring into the work we do.
You know, the fact that the headquarters is in San Diego and California seems to be reopening like a bit more quickly than New York. Are there talks about return to work? And if so, what does that look like?
You know, anyone that's doing it will tell you the complexity, and you guys of your own businesses, the complexity of no matter how fast a market is opening or not opening, everything from the physical environment you're dealing with. Do you have elevators? Do you not have elevators? How many people what's the construct of your, it's not an easy conversation to have. It's really simple for us. We won't do it until we know that there is a safe way to do it. And part of that safe way to do it will be our employees' comfort with it. And it's something we're also measuring and having conversations with the employee base around. Now in retail, that's a balancing act, because we have this really strong emotional pull to get back to work because we have partners that are in 1,500 stores every day. But the reality is the corporate environment has a very different footprint, has a lot more people in it, et cetera. So it comes with dynamics that our stores don't. But it creates a real sort of camaraderie to want to lean in and be there and be present. We're erring on making sure that we follow through in a safe fashion, and I don't see us taking any immediate steps in the immediate future to bring people back just yet.
Well, you're a returning member to this. We're so appreciative. If there's one thing that you hope marketers carry with them from this experience, what do you hope it is?
Well, I'm a marketer, so I'll go with two. I never stick with just being until I can only have one. One would be on the personal front. It goes back to one thing we already talked about, which is allow the humanity to continue to be present. But the other one I would actually bring to is the marketing community. I have loved watching what has always been present in this community, but I think has really become reflective, which is our shared commitment to each other as a community. The way moments like you guys have brought together, which I think is great. There have been really small, intimate ones to really large ones. And I think we have all discovered that marketing is a collaborative sport outside of our own brands. And we're all so much better when we can kind of collide with each other. And I've loved it. And I hope that absolutely is something we continue to do, is pick up the phone, connect with each other, be on Zoom, talk to each other, share, learn together, fail together, collaborate in unique ways than we ever thought we would. And I think that's something that will remain, I hope does.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. And I've seen it happen here and elsewhere. So in complete agreement. Well, thank you for joining us for round two. We're very appreciative.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And Anda, who is next?
So next up, very excited to welcome Michael from Wells Fargo, who is also here for the second time. Hi, Michael, and welcome back.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
Of course. I can't wait to hear everything that's happened since we last talked. I'm sure some of it has been hard, and I'm sure some of it has been really interesting and hopefully also positive. Before I jump into some of the things that you shared last time, just give us a sense at a high level, how has your thinking evolved?
Yeah, so first of all, I just wanted to mention that I'm learning so much from the other panelists in the conversation. So I think I'm getting more out of it than maybe I'm giving on some level for sure. And I'm also coming to you from my 13-year-old son's room. That's why he has the coolest, most comfortable chair in the house. So I've kind of taken it over for our discussion, just to so I can maximize my comfort.
I was gonna ask, what's up with the chair and the basketballs?
Everything, right? The whole vibe. So what's changed is one of the things that we were in the middle of was managing all of the urgent communications to get out to different types of customer relationships that we had on a very quick basis, right? So small business customers needed information about the Paycheck Protection Program. Mass customers needed information about how and when to expect their government checks. Mortgage customers that may have lost their jobs needed help with how they were going to navigate through forbearance and how we were going to make that easy. So it was this super crisis mode of rapid turnaround to communicate with our customers. And one of your survey questions at that time was, how do you think that we're doing in the communication to our customers? And I had said, I think we were maybe a 5 or a 6 out of 10. And in part, that was just because it was so overwhelming, and we had seen some data that we weren't quite breaking through. But last week, we saw some information from JD Power, who had surveyed our customers and our competitors' customers, asking specifically during the crisis, have you heard from your bank? Is the information valuable? Are you getting it in the right kind of cadence? And we were 10 percentage points higher than our closest competitor in all the major categories. And a lot went into that, right? So a lot of it was the ability to make rapid cycle decisions, the ability to deploy in our own channels, the customer centricity in the way that we crafted the communication. But another major lever was within our technology stack, which was the ability for us to use our own first-party data to reach our customers in a very segmented way in paid media. And what we learned was that we expanded our reach, the reach of our total customer base with this technology by 20 to 25%. And so just being able to virtual being able to reach more people helped a lot in terms of us being able to break through with the important information.
Wow, that's really interesting to hear. How did you, I guess, lead up to those decisions? I'm assuming the decisions around some of the platforms that you are using and the data that you have were obviously not made during the crisis. So,
right. Yeah, this is something that's been evolving over the last 5 years. And 3 years ago, we put in a data management platform. We built a lot of infrastructure to make it possible, and we had been using at scale. About half of our media spend this year will be using first-party data to reach our own customers or suppress our own customers, depending on the nature of what we're trying to do, even though our media spend's tripled since then. And so we never imagined that crisis communication would be, it wasn't the primary use case that we built it on, but it turned out to be one of the major levers for us to break through.
Interesting. Last time you were on, you said you're doubling down on content, making, I don't know if, I can't remember if you said twice as much or 3 times as much. How has that evolved?
Well, it's a good question. It's primarily been centered around the urgent need to communicate what's happening in the world and help our customers be successful, right? Depending on the nature of the relationship that we have with them. But what we've been pivoting towards now, because the house is on fire nature of this crisis is maybe behind us a little bit. It doesn't mean that people aren't going to continue to hurt and lose jobs and have needs, but the volume and the weight of it is a little different now. And so what we're focused on is, one, business by business, how and when and where are we going to re-enter the market to the extent that we pulled back? And how does the brand need to show up in order to be successful, both, showing the appropriate level of cultural awareness and sensitivity to what's going on, as well as relevance, right? And one of the biggest challenges of this, there are really kind of two, is that the nature of how the COVID experience has been, happening for people is very different by geography. 80% of the infections are in 11 states. And so if you're in New York, it's very different than if you're in South Carolina. We've been thinking about, for example, in our checking business, we have a couple of work streams that we've got going on. One that's scheduled to happen in July, and one that was kind of a later time frame in September. And we had this insight, right, that we thought that this was going to be the moment in time where people, as the economy opens up, would begin to celebrate these little victories of getting pieces of their life back, right? Because they've been in lockdown for so long in many places. So for all the parents that have been homeschooling, maybe the fact that their children are going back to school in the fall would be like, oh, it's a little bit of a sigh of relief, a little bit of like, you'd celebrate something that normally would have been like getting your kids on the school bus wouldn't have been that big a deal. but considering the circumstances, it would be, right? And then what we're finding as we're trying to identify these little victories is some places might not be going back to school in fall. Some places might need to continue to homeschool. And so there isn't a kind of a singular solution for the brand for how to do this. And what we're realizing is it's going to require us to be far more nimble and thoughtful for how we do it. And then as well, we have to be able to make these creative decisions on the content as late as possible in the cycle for them to really be relevant, right? So some of the things like, a television broadcast video or social video, digital video, you might have 2 or 3 month lead time from concept to production and hiring directors. And what we've realized is that's not going to work. So we have to take some of the learnings of, how we went really fast during the crisis and rethink our own ways of getting things produced and getting things out to our customers that's more kind of in the moment, because you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what's going to be relevant when, or how something's going to twist or turn, or if there is a recurrence somewhere.
So Michael, does that mean that from a resourcing standpoint, are you thinking about bringing more stuff internally so that you're more nimble and efficient in creating those, in making the creative?
Well, we have quite a robust research team, and it's a combination of tools that we lead in-house and suppliers that help us get rapid cycle answers. So I think that probably the ecosystem overall will be in place. Part of it too that we've been we've experimented with this a lot in our product marketing, but the brand side is we're starting to apply this as well. As we may have a few different versions of the content that we're producing. We'll run a small experiment in social, $5,000-$10,000 to see which one is actually resonating, and then we'll put the money behind that one. And because it's faster and more accurate to get an in-market test for something like that and maybe lower risk than to try and run it through a traditional approach of survey and response and reports and so forth. So we're doing a lot of real-time testing in market.
That makes sense. And what about the actual making of the creative? How much are you relying on agencies versus internally?
Well, a little bit of both. So we do have an in-house agency at Wells Fargo that has production capacity and capability. So we're producing a number of things in-house. And then we've also, because of the shelter-in-place orders, right, in the traditional creative centers like Los Angeles and New York and so forth, we've actually had to do some very creative things like hiring creative production folks who might actually produce it in their house, right? So the brand commercial, we just launched a brand commercial a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, which is really a high-level brand message about how we're here to help, and then pointing out some of the specifics of what we're doing from a philanthropy perspective, from a mortgage forbearance perspective, right? It's not dissimilar to what you've seen with other kind of COVID-related advertising, but hopefully a little bit unique for us. And the way we produced it is we had 3 creators in different parts of the country, and we gave them pieces of the script and of the visual, and then they all produced the content, and then we edited it in one place. But we had 3 different visual creators that ultimately brought it together versus like a singular director and a singular production company. And we were able to we did that in a matter of days.
That's pretty crazy. My final question is, has this crisis influenced the way you think about organizing the marketing team?
Well,
a big question.
Not so much, organizing the team, but certainly rethinking how we work and to what extent can we be crisper on who makes the decision when, so that we can move faster, and how do you get the right level of input from business partners to make a decision, but ultimately you have to go, because if at the end of the day you've got to play some sort of diplomatic role where you're incorporating all the feedback into the Treaty of Versailles, like nothing's ever going to happen. And so it's like, okay, we got you, we hear you, but this is what we're going to do, and you got to roll. So it has been less about organization, but more about operating principles, right? And then the other thing that we're seeing, which is more broadly for our business, and the marketing team is getting involved in these conversations, is how does the overall customer experience need to evolve from here? It's not as simple as just, we'll reopen branches when, shelter-in-place orders get lifted and everything feels safe. A number of things that we do right now, much of what we do in our business is digitized already, right? Because that's just the nature of what we do. But there are some things that do require a physical presence for maybe reasons of security or risk, that you need to go into a branch. And so we're rethinking, like, how could you achieve those kinds of outcomes for customers in a virtual setting, and what kinds of tools and you know, more and standards and so forth would be required, because, you know, we're anticipating that, you know, these kinds of things could happen again. And also just that the nature, kind of the conversation we were talking about earlier, is there may be a bit of an anthropological change in our behavior to be together and do things in a more virtual way than we have in the past. And we need to be prepared for that and not wait for it to happen to us.
Yeah, and I think your point around, you know, how does the economy completely restructure as a result of this, and what does that mean for a large organization like Wells Fargo is also it's a big question. Michael, thank you so much for sharing all of that wisdom, all of those insights. I really appreciate it, and thank you for being on.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Of course. Rachel, back to you. I think you have the next speaker.
Yes, Renata back for round 2. Hey, Renata.
Can you hear me?
I can. Great to see you again.
Nice to see everyone here too, and I'm happy to be back.
Yeah, so
2 months, I think. I don't know. I was in the second one or the first one. Can't believe it. It was right in the beginning.
Yeah, this is round 10, so it could have been 2.5 months ago, which is crazy. So
it is.
for SC Johnson, I mean, you continue to remain, so everyone, Renata is the VP of Marketing at SC Johnson, and your products, you know, continue to remain so part of, you know, everyone's global life. I'm curious to hear about what's transpired in your business over the last 8 weeks.
Yeah, as you said, you know, it's we feel the responsibility of producing nonstop, 24/7. We wish we could produce more. We wish we could have more. We feel really good that our brands are well received in consumers' house and can help if either, you know, with the cleaning products kill the virus, or with the candles bring a little bit of a fresh and nice scent, but also creating that home atmosphere, or if it's with Ziploc, allowing people to save their food and save the leftover for the next day recipe. So we are playing a very, very important role in consumers' house right now, in consumers' lives. We respect that. We appreciate everything that the consumer is giving back to us, and we're trying to give as much back as we can, because we understand that this is a tough moment for everyone, and we're doing everything we can to minimize the frustration of consumers when they go to the stores and they can't find the products.
Mm-hmm. So when we spoke 8 weeks ago, and we've obviously spoken in between since, so much of your job has become focused on the immediate and supply chain, and not future thinking, like outbound marketing. So I'm curious, like, over the last 8 weeks, has your focus changed? How have you reorganized your team? Like, what are people working on?
Yeah, it definitely has changed. When we spoke, it was right in the beginning, right? So I guess consumers were running to the stores, and they were just, you know, believing and trusting every information that was out there. So they were just loading, right? They were just buying everything and loading, because they really didn't know what was going to come and what was going to happen. So right now, what we've seen is that consumer behaviors have shifted, and consumers' lives have shifted in senses that we don't think it's going to go back to what it was before. So in thinking about the future, we are now forecasting, we're planning also a lot based on these new behaviors, right? I mean, there's this, consumers are cooking more at home, they are enjoying more their backyards. There's a lot of people investing in their backyards and you know, like in furnitures, in jacuzzis and other things, or, you know, just the people that can, of course. But there is are new movements out there, and we're planning for those new movements. We're developing new products for those new behaviors that we're seeing from consumers. So it could be just a bigger candle so they can burn longer outdoor. It could just be a bag that allows your food to be preserved for longer. It could be a disinfectant that kills faster, or wipes that are biodegradable and it dissolves faster. There are a lot of new things that have come up that allows us to bring new products to the marketplace, but also communicate with the consumers in a different way.
How fast can you bring a product to market?
Yeah, so this has been interesting. I heard the previous conversation with Wells Fargo, and we didn't think we could do as fast as we've been doing. We've been creating assets, as he said, at home. We're working with a ton of suppliers that have been amazing. We are also doing everything we can to keep our labs safe, so our scientists can come back and they can develop products. The factories are up and running, so you can test some of those new products. So we are actually bringing to the marketplace the fastest one, and it is really fast for our industry because it's EPA approved. We're launching a new product that kills the virus in September. So from the day that this all became reality, we're talking about 4 months. That's going to be the fastest one that's coming to the marketplace. And then we have other ones that are going to launch in the January, February timeframe. So we will have things that will take 4 months, up to 12 months, up to 24 months. It really depends on what we're talking about. But the fastest one in September, you should be able to see that in several stores already.
So I'm just thinking about your go-to-market around that. Will you be as direct and say it kills COVID, or will the messaging be more delicate?
SC Johnson has opted to be more delicate. Everything we've been doing has been all the messages out there, and believe me, we touched and changed messages on a weekly basis based on new behaviors, and we read a lot of what consumers are putting on social media and on the comments on not only ours feeds and advertising or digital and social, but also our competitors, and we try to switch according to that behavior. But so we've been always very positive. We want to protect houses and protect families. We want to ensure that you can enjoy your house and you can enjoy in a safe and good spirit. We're never going to come and say we killed the virus, you're not gonna have it or anything like that. We're here to make it a little bit more, to bring the positive and to give. So for example, on the Glade business, we talk about escapism, we talk about staycations. On the disinfectant business, is all about protecting your house. So we don't like on Ziploc. I'm very proud of the work the team has done. In less than 2 weeks, they have a full STEM, like a collection of STEM projects online for moms and dads and anyone to help little kids. We have a whole collection of recipes with leftovers, so you don't throw that half tomato off. You don't know what to do with that. So it's always on the positive side, with the positive attitude of a family company.
So let's think future, beyond future product launches. Like I know within your organization, based on your fiscal, you're probably thinking about, the upcoming calendar year. How do you think about marketing spend during this time?
Yeah, so we have opted to continue to invest. As long as we have demand, we want to, and we have capacity production, we will be investing. What we don't want is to invest, advertise, and then frustrate the consumer going to the store and not having the product. Mm-hmm. So for us, mental availability and physical availability, they're coming hand in hand and together. And the plans for next year, our fiscal year finishes now in June, and our plan for next fiscal year is to continue to invest. We didn't, if anything, we didn't drop any penny, any cent on our spending. And we want to continue to invest, and we want to continue to give consumers the right messages and the right assets, and if when possible, even giving them some content that helps them fulfill maybe this empty space and this empty time in their lives. So,
mm-hmm. And from a team standpoint, how has the culture evolved over the last 8 weeks?
Ups and downs. I'm sure all the other presenters probably said the same, right? I mean, I think it's not, the culture is, we are in all this together. So SC Johnson, because of our role, we've been not just selling, but we've been donating, and we've been trying to help as much as we can with our products. So we're very proud of the Johnson family. We're very proud of SC Johnson. We're very proud of our employees. We had people knocking at our doors at our factories to ask us if they could come to work. You know, retirees, people that had left SCJ, everyone wanted to help, and everyone wanted to come to work and produce products. I guess what is tough is, of course, you know, like working away from each other, and we don't know for how long, right? You do lose a lot of the human touch. And we all miss that. Marketing is about humanity. Marketing is about touching, contacting, you know, seeing people and seeing reactions, and not seeing that, not having that, of course, brings ups and downs to everyone. So we're trying to do, we have several things we do during the week. We have yoga classes. We have SC Johnson Experience to try to bring some fun. We have trivia. It's actually happening right now. There's a trivia happening. So we're still trying to keep it and to keep people integrated. The young marketers are doing some very fun videos. TikTok is booming. Our brands are super strong on TikTok right now. So that's keeping us, keeping the fun. And so, yeah, but I would say it's ups and downs, right? I mean, we have good days and we have tough days.
Well, I thank you for joining us for round two. We're so appreciative, and hopefully you can get back to trivia or stay with us. It's up to you.
I'll stay here. I'm not so good on trivia. You know, I always lose. I'll stay here a little bit with you guys.
Nice. Well, thank you. Anda?
Yes.
I think we are doing the next one together.
Yeah, let's do it.
Our friend Carla. Carla, are you in the house?
Hold on. I am. There we go. Hi.
Hi, Carla.
Hi, ladies.
You look great.
Thank you. You do too.
Are you close to us here in the Hamptons?
I am.
Great. Well, at some point, whenever it's safe, we need to grab a drink together.
Yeah, I love that. A socially distanced drink.
Yeah, exactly.
I would love that.
So Carla, I'll kick it off. I just want to know, how have things been on the city side since we last talked? I know there was a lot of change going on. We also heard from Jen. She talked a little bit about Project New Day and how you're kind of using that as the framework for everything to come. How have you advanced your ideas and projects around that?
Yeah, well, first of all, you guys, I'm glad to be back for round two. And to sort of help close this out, I am going to apologize if you hear any kind of music behind me. I don't know if you do, but if you do, it's my daughter is in her 5:30 dance class, so I can't turn it off. But anyway, as much as I might like to, lots of stuff going on. I mean, you heard from me, you heard from Jen, and now back again from me. And look, I think what we're looking at right now is how do we start to pivot out of the sort of, you know, COVID madness and think about what comes next. And I think, you know, Rachel, you said something the last time we were here that we had not yet seen on our end, but it was because it was still kind of early on. But this idea that consumers were kind of pivoting a little bit from this notion of like, yeah, I'm glad that you're saying thank you to me, but like, what's the utility that you're giving me? What are you doing? And utility coming in many different forms. And so since then, we've really been trying to figure out, what does utility mean for us? And in some cases that means offers, it means relief on, you know, mortgages, it means, you know, small business loans, it means offers for consumers. And sometimes utility means, what are you doing in our community? And tell us how you're actually impacting the community that I live in, and how do you impact it beyond just CSR, but how do you do it in ways that actually impact people's livelihoods? And so we are, you know, we continue to do things COVID related. We continue to tell the stories of the work we're doing. We continue obviously to offer consumers all the offers that, you know, that they need. We continue to work with our clients on the institutional side very differently, but we are definitely looking right now with an eye towards the future. I think that, you know, and what does that look like? You know, what does that look like even? And that's what the thing that Jen was talking about is a project that we literally, you know, started just a couple of weeks ago, because we had been pivoting and thinking about, you know, this really important time, particularly for banks in the end of the year, with the elections and all that. We had been thinking about all of that. How do we, what do we look like? What do we sound like? Da, da, da. And then all of a sudden, boom. And now we've really got to think even beyond that. What do consumers want? And what does our target want? And how do we show up when we are, you know, in this new normal? So we are hybriding. We're doing a little bit of both right now.
When we saw you last, you talked a lot about engaging with the employees, because there were tens of thousands. I can't even remember the exact number.
200,000.
200,000. So, I mean, in terms of employee engagement and morale, now that we're 10 weeks into all of this, what are you seeing?
Yeah, I would tell you that that's probably the hardest and I think yet most important thing that any of us have to do, whether you've got 200,000 employees like we do, or whether you've got 100 employees. I think because everybody is reacting to this pandemic very differently. So we all talk about, you know, we're all kind of in this together. Well, the reality is we're not all in it together. We're all experiencing a pandemic, but we're all experiencing it in our own different ways. And, you know, for me, I have to apologize to you that I've got a dog sitting over here and I've got a husband working in the other room, and there's a guy outside doing something to the landscaping of this rental home. And then my kid is down, you know, but then there's other people who have totally different issues, and their issues are, you know what, I'm sitting in an 800 square foot studio in Brooklyn by myself. I haven't seen a soul in 10 weeks. And you know what? That's also, you know, that's an issue that they're going through. So we're all dealing with things in very different ways. And I couldn't be more grateful to Citi that we have the resources that we have, everything from, you know, whether it's, you know, making sure that our employees have access to, like we're talking about well-being as everybody else is, but we have access to whether it's, you know, you want to go talk to somebody very confidentially about what you're going through kind of emotionally. We also have, free online gym services that people get to, you know, so again, if you can't afford to, you know, to be a part of some other app or whatever, we're giving people those options. We're helping people figure out how to manage, like trying to still have a community and build a culture within your teams when you're on Zoom, or even worse, when you're just on the phone. So there's a lot of stuff that's going on at Citi. And for me personally, if I can take it to a more personal place, I have instituted, interestingly enough, in the world of what we've learned, right? I instituted this thing where I thought it was so awesome. And we were going to have like my entire team every Wednesday, happy hour, 4 p.m. It wasn't going to be after work. It was going to be during work. So people didn't feel like, you know, that they had to, you know, come to something when they had family time or their own time. And we were going to have fun. Like we were going to have fun, damn it. And, you know, 4 or 5 weeks into it, I had someone on my leadership team was, you know, brave enough to say to me, hey, you know, I mean, maybe they shouldn't be every week, or maybe they shouldn't be an hour long, or, you know, maybe, you know, like maybe we're forcing people to have fun here a little bit. And so it was really interesting because Thursday, yesterday we had our other weekly one. And I did a poll and I was like, I'm hearing from, you know, rumblings here and there. And, you know, and I got such rich information and insight from the team as to what they wanted that Wednesday meeting to be. It's now going from an hour to 45 minutes. It's now going from weekly to bi-weekly, and they have taken over the agenda, right? Because it's what they want. And so I think that as we think about culture and as we think about people, it's so important that we listen to them, and even the best intentions are actually sometimes not, you know, not the impact they have is not what you intend. So I think lots of learning in the last many weeks.
The last question for you, I really want to hear, I've always admired you as a human, and I really want to hear, how have you been surviving this as a human, like personally? Because I don't think we keep asking, like, how are you doing? How are you serving your team? How are you serving your customers? How are you dealing with the rest of the leadership team? How are you surviving it yourself?
Well, thank you for the question. I would tell you some days better than others. So I actually did have coronavirus. I was sick for 10 days. I didn't get tested at the time because no one would test me. It was early on. But I did get the what's that other test? The antibody test, and it tested positive. And I had pretty much every symptom there was. So the first kind of, I would tell you, 10 days of this whole thing and being locked down was really me being in isolation, and it was very lonely. In fact, I would tell you I was in isolation for 21 days. So in my room in the city, daughter, my husband was on the West Coast at the time for a little bit of it. And our daughter had to take care of herself. I mean, I sent everybody home, and then we got this little dog. I mean, it was really, really hard. But I will tell you what that kind of helped me figure out is how grateful I was actually to be healthy again after it. And I was very, very afraid because we just didn't know what was going on. I was very afraid. But I will tell you, and I know we're about to run out of time, I will tell you one of the things that it has really done for me is, and the way that I'm coping is every single night, and I wasn't like this before, every single night, I say out loud, I don't write it down, but I say out loud what I'm grateful for that day, just that day. And some days it's hard because it was a rough day or like a very emotional day or whatever. So, but gratefulness and what I'm grateful for every single day, I say one thing. The other thing is I've taken to walking. So as much as those of you who know me know that I hate having a dog, and I know it's hard to say because my husband's the CMO of Petco, but I love a dog. I love dogs. I just hate taking care of a dog. Does that make sense? Does that make sense to everybody? I hope people
I
are
feel
nodding.
about children, so I get it.
I mean, I love the dog. Like, he's sitting right here. He won't leave my side, but like, I just don't like taking care of a puppy. But anyway, he's awesome. But he's forced me to walk. And so every day I walk 3.5 to 5 miles and I clear my head. It's not that I don't think about work, but I actually like clear my head. And the last thing I'd say is puzzles. Anyone who follows me on social media knows that I've been really taking up puzzles. It is the only thing in the world for me that takes my mind off of everything else. Like you could be like running around me in circles, and if I'm doing the puzzle, I don't even notice. So but I will tell you, the days are long, but the weeks are moving quickly, and not every day is a good day. Not every day is a good day. And I think you just have to allow yourself to have a really shit day once in a while. It's okay. Like, you just have to be okay with that. We're not perfect. And, we just have to be okay with that and just call a timeout when we need a timeout. Take a day when you need a day. Say you're not going to do a video Zoom when you don't feel like, that you're up for a video, but take a call instead. Like, we've got to take care of ourselves. We're in this for the long haul. But that's how I'm trying.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Carla. That was really great advice. I love that. And now from one incredible female leader to another, and I realize you probably don't even know each other, but I know you're going to love each other after hearing each other talk. So Angela, welcome.
Hello.
Hi. You look fabulous as always.
Well, you're so sweet. So do you.
Oh, thank you. Angela, we did a podcast at CES this year, and first of all, holy shit, we were in Vegas. What?
And that's like last year, 3 years ago.
Like 4 years ago. And second, I remember I enjoyed talking to you so much because it felt like I was learning from this incredible woman who had gone through so much and had come out the other end succeeding. And now I find myself being very curious as to how this incredible woman has been dealing with this crisis. So you were appointed CMO, like a couple of months before the crisis started? A few months.
October 21st,
October,
2019. Right. So it's about 6 months.
Right. And then, the crisis hit. The automotive industry was hit both on the supply and the demand side. So I would love to just hear from you. What were some of the first things you thought, first reactions? And then I'm probably going to also ask you the personal question as well, because I love all of the advice that you give. So let's start with the work stuff.
You're so nice. Well, when I look back to that time when we were at CES, what a crazy week that was. I mean, it was just off the holiday, on a plane to Vegas, one panel or discussion or interview or dinner or meeting after another. I mean, it was just insane. So that's not the life we have right now. It's funny that that was just a couple months ago. But even when we were at CES, and then shortly, maybe even just a week after that, Hyundai is a South Korean based owned company. And so there was already COVID-19 bubbling in Asia, and it was coming to South Korea pretty fast and furious. So we were concerned and watching very heavily as we get still a large number of our cars from South Korea. We have a plant in Montgomery, Alabama too, but we're very connected to Seoul, and also for our counterparts who are there, concerned for their health and safety and wellness. So we were watching. And so I think we had sort of a heads up to COVID and maybe the real possibility of it being named a pandemic. And I think it was more about how much it would come to the US, when and how big it would be, and what it would be like in this country that's very different from the way I think other countries in other parts of the world sort of mandate and run their government. So lots of unknowns, but watching very heavily in those very early days. And I think we had we were just in tune to it, I think, because we were talking about it in our executive meetings in January. And then through February, we had someone at our plant in Ulsan, South Korea, was tested for COVID-19. The plant shut down. They immediately disinfected it. The plant had to shut down for 2 days. And that's when we started learning about the rapid testing that was happening in that country and the way that they were quarantining or asking people to shelter in place for those who had tested positive, just to keep the rest of the population very healthy. And thankfully, they were back to business pretty quickly after that. And it's really been pretty smooth since then. But we had some good learnings early just watching to see what our Korean counterparts did. The biggest thing for us to grapple with here in the US is that this is really a global company, that it's very unique from other car companies in that we pretty much own our entire ecosystem. So it isn't just North America headquarters, which we're about 1,000 people here in Southern California, but the plant in Montgomery, Alabama has 3,000 people. Our captive, which is Hyundai Capital, they've got a large body of people here in Southern California, and then all of our affiliates, including our ad agencies, logistics, supply, all of those people are interconnected. And we were just very, I think, cautious and wanting to be as fiscally solvent through this whole time to have us come out very strong on the back end. So there's been a commitment first to keeping all our employees safe and healthy. We went home to work from home on March 20th. That was the last day we went to the office. And I think everyone's been amazingly creative, resilient, inventive, and doing all that they need to do to work from home, I think very successfully. And we did have a COVID-19 case at our plant in Montgomery that shut down, took the same steps that they did in South Korea. And of course, then the plant ended up shutting down for about a good 6 weeks, but it's been back up and online for about 2.5 weeks now.
That's awesome.
So it's been good. It's been lots of learnings, but it feels like business as usual, but with this layer of caution.
Of Zoom calls.
Of Zoom calls, but and there's tons of them. And those are difficult in their own way, and yet it's the best way for us to stay connected. And that's where I think everyone's just done an amazing job.
So Anja, I'm curious, obviously being fiscally responsible was the #1 priority, and I totally get it. As you think about the second half of the year, and you look at the data from Asia, I'm assuming you're seeing that there's a growth in demand, potentially even a spike in demand for cars. And we were just talking with Audi and Ford before, about an hour ago, that there's more and more demand for people to just control their own space, and also potentially even for more local travel, which lends itself to buying more cars. So as you think about that trend, as you look at the data from Asia, what does that mean for your marketing plan in the second half of the year, especially from a paid standpoint?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I mean, we did turn down our media spend in March, second half, in April, which was appropriate, all right? Retail was down. But we didn't want to go dark. We definitely wanted to bring programs and talk to consumers about what we were doing as a brand. We had a couple programs. We relaunched Hyundai Assurance, which essentially is a program for owners and new customers, those who had the ability to buy a car and wanted to, this is actually a good time to be a car. The incentives are so good. And it allows you to defer your payments should you find yourself in financial trouble due to COVID-19. So really great. And then we ended up giving about $4.3 million through our Hope on Wheels initiative to 22 hospitals across the country that were starting with drive-through testing. We thought testing was a place that no one else was sort of thinking of doing first. There was ventilators and PPE, and all of that was wonderful work. But we thought, what about testing, which of course is what we thought was part of the success that happened in South Korea. So that's where we really put our messages in April, really focused on that. The other amazing thing, I just want to touch on this, is we've been trying to get digital retailing really to the next level. And of course that takes partnership with our dealership network, who've been amazing through this time too. But many of them, I think we had up to 275 dealers across the country who were asked to close their doors. Or if they were allowed to be open, it was only for service, which was considered essential business. So very, very difficult, very difficult. But it sort of forced that next step of saying, what do I need to do online paperwork and potentially home delivery, and then sanitizing and disinfecting cars for safety for however someone takes a car, because people are interested in personal vehicles. I think because there is an idea of feeling like you need that freedom, especially if you were relying on public transportation in certain parts of the country. So we do see incredible shopping activity. I mean, that spiked tremendously. And there is a lot of pent up demand. And we think actually that the second half of the year is going to be really strong.
So I'm assuming that means you're doubling down from a marketing standpoint as well.
Well, you know, doubling down, I think we'll go back to what we thought we were going to plan. I mean, again, the cautious nature of making sure that, you know, we've got all of our bases covered, but we do have 2 product launches coming at the end of the year, and we need to do those very strong. We have a brand new Elantra, and then we have a facelift on our Santa Fe, and those are 2 core models for us. So that'll be really the focus. Bigger conversations on things like Super Bowl, which we've done every year for about 10 years. It'll be hard to say yes to spending that money this year because we spent it the year before. So we'll see. But that's what I'm saying. You know, we might be a little more cautious than we have in years past. Otherwise, it'll be business as usual. We need to be out there talking to people about how great our vehicles are.
Totally. So the budget sounds like it might shift away from events and sports, which makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
But it's so interesting, the Super Bowl. I haven't even thought about, you know, what's going to happen next year with the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
It's going to be it's a good panel conversation topic for.
I think so. It's still the biggest platform, you know, but what's going to happen with football? I don't know if anyone's really clear if there's going to be people in the stands or how that's going to work. Just for us, the expense is probably what's going to really deter us from maybe investing, but who knows? We still love it. It still could possibly happen, but you know, we're using tons of digital like we always have, but you know, we're still a challenger brand. So we still need to use broadcast as well. And we just need to let people know that this is sort of a new era for Hyundai, and there's lots to talk about, definitely. So it'll be great.
So Angela, tell me what you are doing personally to survive this as a leader.
Well, you know, I was listening to Carla and what she was doing about her team. My team has been resilient and they've been great. I mean, we're actually a small team at Hyundai in the marketing department. We're only about 32 people. Well, that sounds pretty specific, doesn't it? So it's 32 people. And we work very closely with our agencies that they're sort of internal agencies. They are independent. But it's a Notion, and then Canvas is our media company, and they're about 300 and 250 a piece. So they are really our extension of the marketing department. But because I came from a Notion before I came to Hyundai as the CMO, that's like my family, like very easy to work with them. And I already knew everybody who was working at Hyundai. So even though I've been in this job for 6 months, it's very familiar. I would say as an executive on the executive team, that has been a very intense and focused part of my day. And I think my team appreciates and knows that's the priority for me, is to be with that group, to be leading the whole company forward. And they pretty much take on the heavy lifting of the day-to-day. So that's been really great. But we try to do a weekly touch base. We call it tea. We don't really drink at the office at Hyundai. Those were my old advertising days. But some people come with a glass of wine to the party and I don't care. But they really just want to hear what's happening from the executive level. They don't hear everything. Although our CEO, Jose Munoz, has been very transparent. We've had a couple all agency calls where I'm like, wow, he pretty much laid out everything that I know. So pretty much there's just a lot of transparency and information sharing. I think that's good, but it really is to touch base and see faces. We are all missing each other. I mean, I'm an advertising agency person. I mean, it's all about the collaboration. So that's hard. I think it's been hard for the creatives at our agency. I think they've done some very clever things on how to do some creative workshops online to kind of help feel like they're all together. I think that's been a challenge. Personally, I did not like working from home. You know, I'm a worker like you are, you know, just always going, never at home. I put on a pair of shoes today for the first time just to feel like I was dressing for this, but I really have lived in my UGG slippers for 8 weeks. I was almost concerned if I was going to be able to wear shoes again. That was a big one. And in the first couple of days, I was only a few feet away from my own refrigerator and a bottle of wine. And I was like, you know, this is going to end up badly because this is going to start early and earlier every day. So I started a kind of a detox. And I'm happy to report I've lost 17 pounds since I had put on weight. I wasn't happy about that. It was all those dealer dinners and all that travel had caught up to me. And I finally stepped on the scale and I was like, we need to talk. So I really was good about that. And I'm walking more. And the other thing, I should speak Spanish because I have actually this is my second marriage. Both of my husbands had Spanish as their first language, and I actually lived in Mexico for a short time. You would think I would speak Spanish, but I don't. So I'm taking an online Spanish course that I'm doing every day, and I'm walking with my husband almost every night. And then I just really focused on this detox, which was easier to do at home because I could control what I was going to eat and plan and all that kind of thing, which you cannot do very easily.
Honestly, I think you're the only person I now know who has actually done a detox during this time. I think we've all done the talks during this time.
Well, and everyone's been saying, I can't fit in my clothes. I can't fit in my clothes. I was thinking, yeah, I couldn't fit in mine really before this. So that was going to be trouble. So I thought I need to get back to those clothes. So
you're an inspiration to us all.
I tried.
Thank you so much, Angela. I really appreciate you sharing all that wisdom. Rachel, I thought maybe you could do a quick wrap up and a goodbye, and then I'll jump in myself.
Thank you so much, you guys.
Thank you, Angela. That was awesome. I think the coolest thing of this whole experience is how humanizing it has been of, you know, all these marketing leaders that we admire. We've gotten to know them in intimate ways that probably we wouldn't have otherwise. It's clearly consistent, right? Consumer behavior has changed. It's forced companies to accelerate things that they once considered innovation. Now it's table stakes. There's an enormous amount of empathy that we all have to bring to work every day because we just literally don't understand what's going on in people's lives. And the nature of work is forever changed. And I love that you got WeWork on the line today. It was provocative to hear the things that he shared with us. I mean, that's what I took away from today.
Yeah, I think this crisis represents an opportunity for certain brands to completely restart, to reset, for other brands to really come to life because they had already created their brand purpose and have the right technology in place to really do that, and for other brands to take a step back. And I guess what's been interesting to hear is that there's really no right way to handle a crisis. It really does depend on your industry, on your people, on the way you want to treat your people. But it's been really inspiring to have everyone come together every week. So grateful for the audience who's been paying attention and listening and sending questions. And finally, just know that Rachel and I are coming back in a bigger, better, stronger format. I'm not going to say exactly what it is, but I'm going to tease it and say that you're going to get an email about it soon. So excited for us to come together again soon, Rachel. And until then, hope to see you in person around here.
I know. Well, thank you, everyone. We're so internally grateful for your attention and encouraging us to do this for 10 weeks. And you will hear from us soon. And with that, Go have a cocktail or not.
Thank you. Bye.